welcome you all to Trek Wars. Thank you for watching Trek Wars. Today we're going to be talking about Fulltime Torpedoes and some of the different variants that are used by the Federation and the Klingon Empire. So first off, there are several different variants of Fulltime Torpedoes. There are probes, there are quantum torpedoes, there are plasma torpedoes, there are a lot of different torpedoes. And we're going to focus on the most common weapons seen during the Dominion War and during TNG's run of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Alright, so we're going to talk about Fulltime Torpedoes. So basically, Fulltime Torpedoes are long-range artillery weapons. They're really good against destroying the actual physical structure of ships, buildings, planets, space stations. They're your number one go-to to give you the biggest amount of damage you can do to the infrastructure. Now, they're not as effective against shields as they are against the hull itself. So with that in mind, remember, this weapon is designed to attack at extreme long range. So, to be honest, there's really about 3 variants that we see commonly on screen. The Star Trek movies, we see a relatively one-shot Fulltime Torpedo. And then when we get into the newer generation starships, we start seeing multi-shot torpedo launchers. But besides the fact that they could shoot multi-shot, the TNG era torpedoes are significantly stronger than the Kirk era or movie era starships. So they're what I'm going to refer to as a second generation torpedo launcher. Now, at the Dominion War and the Borg, during those movies, when we start fighting the Borg and insurrection and all that stuff, and then with the Defiant, we start seeing quantum torpedoes, and quantum torpedoes are just souped up Fulltime torpedoes. Now, they use different technology to cause this more powerful state, but for whatever reason, you don't really ever see Fulltime torpedoes fired in huge numbers. It's usually between 2 to 4 only. And I'm not particularly sure why that is. I'm sure it has something to do with the way the torpedoes work and the way the launches are, because you need to have a certain level launcher in order to fire second generation torpedoes, and then you need a different kind of launcher in order to fire quantum torpedoes. So we're going to go in a step-by-step explaining what the launchers are, how much they fire, and what kind of ships they would have been on. So the MK line of torpedo launchers are the torpedo launchers seen on the Constitution. They're also seen on the Excelsior. They're single-shot torpedo launchers, and this is the time period of the Golden Era. This is when Starfleet was its most glorious. Now, the torpedoes of the Federation at this time period have an output power level of around 65,000. The MK-12 launchers seen on the Constitution can shoot 1 per tube. The MK-22s, which are seen on the Constellation class starships, which are built later on, they have the ability to fire 3. Now, obviously the Federation can build MK-12s and MK-22s during the same time period, but Starfleet really wasn't focused on this. When the MK-22s were coming out, this is right around the same time the Romulans kind of disappeared. This is also during the same time period when the Klingon Empire collapsed, and there's not really a whole lot of enemies for the Federation out there, and the Federation then starts moving towards the Golden Era. So weaponry wasn't as important as it used to be. Now, the power rating of 65,000 is based off the shields and hull values seen on the movies and other collaborations with data tables that I have, and so it's not telling you the isotope level of the destructive capability. It's only telling you the power output on my graphs, what torpedoes do. To give you an idea, 1 photon torpedo during Kirk's era, which was the most powerful weapon of the time period, is equivalent to 1 shot from a Type X phaser during the TNG era. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule. Now, there are other ships and there are other torpedo launchers that could possibly fire more than just 3. We just don't see them very often, or they're extremely rare. The only version that we see that is commonplace, that is a ship that pretty much everyone has seen and known, is the Constellation class. The Constellation class is one of the ships that Captain Picard served on. and it's a really common ship that was built during the Kirk era. So that ship was designed specifically for combat. It was a replacement for the Excelsior, and it also was designated to long distance patrol duties. Now, that ship was combat oriented, so it was using the Mk-22s. It's in its lure, so that's where the Mk-22 volley comes from. That ship has 2 launchers. It could launch up to 6 full-time torpedoes based on the lure. So that would make our Mk-22s capable of launching 3. Now, the Golden Era, very important that we talk about this. There is a stagnation in technology during the Golden Era because of the lack of enemies. The best example of this is the Ambassador class. So the Ambassador class is using newer technology. It's got Type 11 phaser arrays, but its torpedo launcher is still using the same magazine as the previous ships. They are at the 65,000 power level. The only difference is there is a different torpedo launcher inside this ship, and we don't know exactly what it is, but it's capable of launching at least 5 shots. So that's something to take in consideration. That's something to think about. Now, during the 2340s, you'll see ships like the Cheyenne class and the New Orleans class. Those ships were using old torpedo launchers. Now, after the outbreak of the Cardassian border wars, a new ship hit Starfleet, which is the Springfield class. So the Springfield class is using more modern technology, is using the TNG style torpedoes. Now, the reason it's doing that, they're still going to be single shot, but it's a more powerful warhead. And the reason for that is they could not take on the Galore classes with the ships that we're using, especially with their older technology. So new technology had to be introduced. Alright, so the full-time torpedo technology used in obviously the Galaxy class era, the Captain Picard, the TNG era, those newer generation ships most of them are using second generation torpedoes. Second generation torpedoes are going to have an attack power around 171,000. Now, there is an Mk-40 launcher which launches just 1. There's an Mk-60 launcher which launches 4, and then the Enterprise has an Mk-80 which is capable of launching 10. So let's kind of take a look at an Mk-40. So the Mk-40 launcher was a direct response to Cardassian aggression. We wanted to give ships more power for offense than just standard full-time torpedoes, because they were able to outgun the Cardassians at long distance with their torpedo technology. So this ship was very, very important to the defense of the Federation against the Cardassians to hold them off. Now, the reason why I say the torpedo technology is so different and the power output is very different, besides that the isotope levels that they talk about we see there, we see it on screen take place, where we see the Enterprise fire one of its new generation torpedoes at a Miranda class with its shields down. Now what ends up happening is that Miranda class is going to take one torpedo hit and it's basically going to explode. And we'll take a look at that right now. Now, this is just one of the reasons we know that, is that obviously a Miranda class should be able to take a full-time torpedo and survive. And obviously one torpedo from the TNG era, second generation torpedo launcher, is able to destroy the entire ship. So its destructive output is significantly greater. Now, this obviously is not that variant of a launcher, but the fact it's just launching one torpedo is just showing you that you're getting a significant increase in firepower even though you're using a single shot launcher because of the new generation technology. Now, obviously the Galaxy class can fire more than that. Now, if you go back and you watch the scene where obviously Picard and the Sovereign come in there, we see the Saber the first time. We see the Saber firing about 3 to 4 shots, and I don't remember which it is, but 4 shots is basically what the Mk-60 is doing. And then obviously when you get to the Mk-80, we're having the Enterprise's massive torpedo launcher, which we see on screen fire 8 times, but we know it can fire up to 10. So there are a couple other battle scenes that we can talk about and get an analysis of. Obviously, when we have a Phoenix or the USS Phoenix was a Nebula class starship, which is using the same technology as the Galaxy class, with MK-80 launcher can launch up to 10. We see it destroy a Galar straight out in a torpedo barrage. So that tells you something right there. They did not expect this. They did not know that technology existed. So ships during the border war probably were never using advanced launchers like the MK-80s, MK-60s, or at best they would have seen the MK-40s. Now, another representation of the power increase that we see on screen, which shows us that this is accurate, or at least remotely accurate, is the Dominion bug ship. We know for a fact has a power rating of 520,000. 3 Fulltime torpedoes will destroy the ship. We see Deep Space Nine do this to the Dominion bug ship 3 times in a row with 3 torpedoes. So we know for a fact that the power output is very close to 171,000. Now, another calculation you could take in consideration to justify what I'm telling you is you can look at some of the data tables that talk about the isotons that are used to determine the destructive capabilities of the torpedoes. So we know that some of them are 45, we know some of them are 62, we know there's a variation between 25 isotons, we know there's 200 isotons, there's a lot of different isotons and lots of different calculations. Now let's get into quantum torpedoes. Alright, so obviously a newer generation weapon is quantum torpedoes. So quantum torpedoes power level is way off the charts. It's 325,000. These are MK-90 launchers, which can launch 2, which is seen aboard the Defiant. And supposedly there are some ships that are able to fire up to 12, and they have MK-95 launchers. We don't ever see this on screen. This might just be an enhancement. I've been told that the Akira has this and the modified Sovereign can do this, but on screen we see it only fire between 3 and 4 quantum torpedoes, which falls in line with what we see the USS Defiant doing. So we'll kind of take a look at this scene, and obviously we're going to see 4 torpedoes, so it's 2 each. It does a significant amount of damage to this advanced Cardassian warship. So the power level of the quantum torpedo you've seen here is based upon the advanced Kelton class starships shields, because we see the Defiant attack it. We find out exactly what the shields are based on the amount of times it attacks it. There's also another scene where the Defiant attacks Breen ships, and we see it attack the Breen ship with X amount of pulse phasers, and we see that 4 quantum torpedoes is even stronger than that. And then obviously those 40 pulse phasers would be around 1,300,000 on a power scale. So quantum torpedoes, if 4 of them are hitting around that, we're looking at around 325,000. Now it's not exact, but there's several different scenes that kind of show that. And so we also took in consideration, there are stats saying that it's like 90 to 295 or something, and they use some kind of calibration with the torpedoes I've seen, and so I took that into consideration as well. And I just kind of came up with the 325 because it's not 100% correct, but it's close enough, and that number is easier to work with, so that's what I ended up giving it. So it's very, very close to being accurate, but it's probably slightly weaker than what it should be. So now you guys know about all the different kinds of launchers. Alright, so now let's take a look at the big picture. Let's talk about all these different launchers together and what we learned about them and what we know about them. So we know the Kirk generation launchers are 65,000, and they can fire from 1 to 3. We know the TNG era is got a new power output, which is 171,000. They can fire from 1 to 10. Now, one of the things we take in consideration, if you have a TNG era torpedo launcher, you can still launch the old ammunition from the Kirk era, but for some reason you can't do it reverse. So the torpedoes aboard the Constellation that have not been upgraded with new launchers, MK-40s, the MK-12s, MK-22s cannot launch new generation torpedoes. Now, I'm not sure why this is. If you know, make a comment. I speculate it has something to do with the way the torpedoes are created, and there's maybe something to do with the stability, because they're all done in isotones. The old ones are 25, the new ones are 200 isotones. and in between there. So the power output of the old ones is 45 megatons, the newer ones is 62 megatons, so you guys can have that information if you want it. Now, I understand, and it makes perfect sense, why quantum torpedo launchers can launch quantum torpedoes and the old ammunition, and it makes sense because quantum torpedoes are completely different technology, and they are not using isotopes. So it's a completely different technology. So just so you guys understand, the quantum torpedoes, they use something called 0-point energy. And so you have to have a specialized launcher to keep it stable for the 0-point launchers. So that perfectly makes sense. The part that's kind of confusing me is the old generation torpedoes, the second generation torpedoes, they're using the same exact technology, really, and basically you're just increasing the destructive capability by putting more isotopes in there. So you're going to be seeing some new data tables. If you guys know what's going on with the torpedoes and you can explain to me what has happened, that'd be great. I just want to let you guys know, you guys have helped me so much. I have created new tables based on the information you guys have shared with me, some things that have been wrong, you guys corrected. Great work to all you guys making comments and helping me get things more accurate. I believe I got it basically as correct as I can get it based off your guys' input and obviously what I see on screen. And we will be making future videos about the power outputs of the Klingons, the Romulans, and all the other major races involved in the Dominion War. And we'll also be talking about fleet formations within some of the next upcoming videos. And with that being said, thank you all. And always, I want to thank you guys who are supporting the channel, and a special thanks out to my first supporter, Commander Donald Duncan. Thank you so much. And with that being said, guys, I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching Trek Wars. If you like this material, please subscribe and make a comment. And with that being said, victory is life.